What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Student Built Startups podcast. Thanks for joining me here today. I am stoked to get this interview rocking and rolling. We got a great interview lined up, and we share some amazing, awesome stuff during this podcast episode. So I'm excited for you to listen in. Brief intro, I'm Cameron Stone, host of the Student Built Startups podcast. I interview student entrepreneurs to share their stories and business strategies. So today's guest is going to be talking about how you can make your business build your dynasty. So she's been an entrepreneur for 13 years, and she's been an entrepreneurial educator for the last 10 years. And on top of that, she has done 3 years of doctoral studies on entrepreneurial dynasties. Now, I encourage you to go check out her website, meetprofwhite.com, to get access to everything that she mentions during our episode today. Now, I am super excited to introduce you all to the owner of Becoming Fearless, Professor White. Hey there, Professor White. I'm super happy to have you here on the Student Built Startups podcast. I'm really excited to talk with you. I'll have you start off by saying hello to everyone listening and sharing one crazy but true fact about yourself.
Well, hi, everyone. And thank you so much, Cameron, for extending this opportunity to me. Congratulations on all that you're doing, being an advocate. So I love it. One crazy fact about me is that I almost lost my lunch in a jetway in Jakarta. So I was clear across the other side of the country, and I was like, what am I doing? I should go back. But I had already been traveling for 2 days. So
Oh, man. Oh, that is crazy. Wow. I would be a little nervous. That was me. Oh, man. Well, I hope that never happens again.
Right.
So if you could start with sharing with the audience a little bit about your educational story and some of your entrepreneurial ventures that you've either worked on or are working on right now. So
Cool. Well, I actually received my master's in business from the School of Business and Industry at Florida A&M University. And it's funny because now that's where I teach. So I'm on the other side of the report card. And I also have a degree. I have another bachelor's in wine, spirits, and beverage management. And that complements the certificate that I have in bartending and mixology. So my very first formal business is in hospitality services. 71 Proof is the name of the company. We provide bartender training services, custom cocktail development, and certainly bartender staffing services. I started that back in 2007. I can't believe it's been that long. But I actually, full disclosure, I'm not taking on any clients now because I am writing a dissertation. And I would rather be able to really enjoy my guests and build the kinds of relationships that are authentic to our brand. And I don't have the bandwidth to write a dissertation well and to serve clients, as you might imagine, and teach. I also teach entrepreneurship.
Wow. Yeah. You got a packed schedule, it sounds like. Oh, well, what kind of led you down the path of entrepreneurship? I'm sure that you have something that kind of flipped the switch for you. So.
Wow, it's so crazy. A part of my master's program, so it was a 5-year program. It's 5 years on paper. It actually takes about 6 years in real life. But the first 3 years of the program, we take undergraduate courses. So I have a bachelor's in business. And in order to have been accepted to the master's program, we had to complete a master's level internship. And that internship actually I'm not sure if you can see it, but I did it in Buffalo, New York. And I was in vaccine sales, which is a kind of specialized segment of pharmaceutical sales. So, there wasn't an office to go to. I didn't have a boss that would be looking at what time I got started every day. And I didn't know at the time that was my first introduction to entrepreneurship. It was where I had the sole responsibility. I was given all the resources. I had to create some resources, but I had to build the relationships that produced the revenue. And I didn't know at the time that, that was a form of entrepreneurship. And I still wasn't really bitten by the bug until about 3 years later, kind of like this delayed reaction. And that's when I started my bartending business, 71 Proof.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Did that kind of come naturally to you when you were doing your vaccine sales, or was it just kind of a learning experience?
Oh my goodness. One of the things that I'm not shy about telling my students and anyone who will listen is I actually hyperventilated in the interview that led up to that internship. Because I'm an introvert. A lot of people don't believe me, but I am an introvert. And I was also very shy. So I didn't know at the time that being shy and being an introvert were two different things. But it was like the perfect storm. The AC had gone out. They were running an hour late, and I'm shy. And I couldn't breathe. So it didn't come naturally. But one of the things that I told myself the night of that interview was that I would never allow something like that to happen again. And the very next day, I had an interview with their colleagues. And I said, I have to change the narrative around who LaTanya White was at that time. I had to tell and write a different story. So that was when the light bulb went off about me being in control of my experiences and being in control of what kind of experiences that I create for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like that story because I know a lot of people that are new to entrepreneurship think they have to be like this outgoing, energetic, like vocal person. And it's just really nice to see stories of introverts and shy people. I'm one myself, and I'm starting to come out of my shell a little bit, especially with the podcast. But it's nice to see those stories of people that have actually gotten over that kind of leap. And it shows that it's not just like a natural thing. It's things that can be learned, and you can break through those barriers if you want to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know I've seen some of your videos of you doing like public speaking and doing some like public figure type events. So what kind of led you down the path of like starting doing that kind of stuff?
I it's funny. I would definitely say in service to my students. I wanted to be the example that they needed. And I always had this thing where I tell my students, I am measuring you on your potential, not your performance, but there's this dynamic between what you have the capability of producing and the effort that you're putting forth to produce that. And there's so many students that when we had our one-on-one appointments or they would stop by the office, so articulate, so brilliant, but was hiding that under a light. And what I wanted to do, especially with my TEDx talk, was to empower my students and my colleagues and just empower the community that I was connected to, that without your voice, without what you have to offer to the world, we, we just aren't living our best lives because there's something that you have that can help us be better that you're keeping from us. So that's really had been a part of the motivation for me to get out of my own shell and kind of like take the sacrifice of being in the public eye as an introvert.
Yeah, I really liked kind of your motivation behind that because I'm a firm believer that everybody's like unique in their own way. They've gone through their own unique experiences, and everyone has, because of that, something that they can bring value to other people's lives.
Absolutely.
So it's something I'm very, very passionate about as well.
Right.
So if there was one thing that you wish you would have known, or one thing that would have helped you when you first started that you know now, what would that be?
I would say it would be who I am. Like, who am I really? A part of my business development coaching and teaching is really centered in identity. I believe that the most sustainable brands are authentic brands that represent the founder or the founders in some way. Like, they don't always have to be so robotic or plastic or inaccessible or out of reach or out of touch. they can be really authentic brands. And I was sharing, I was actually just on an IG live a couple of minutes ago, and I was sharing that I went through this identity crisis like 3 years ago, but it put a mirror up and it showed me that I wasn't being authentic to who I am at my core. And it changed how I did business. So one thing about me is I really enjoy these deep, authentic relationships, but I wasn't doing that in my business with my clients. I was like, okay, Nike doesn't do that. Walmart doesn't do that. Like, what am I thinking? How can I ever get to that level if I want to have relationships with all my clients? But authentic to me was I had to have those kinds of relationships because they speak on behalf of who I am, and it allows my clients to be like real ambassadors for what I bring to the table, what we were bringing to the table. So, like, the short answer to your question is really get to know who you are, and come face to face with yourself when nobody is there, and be that same person when everybody's watching.
That's a really, really great piece of advice there. I really like that. And when you were talking about like be like knowing who you are and a brand that kind of represents the like authenticity, and you can incorporate some of who you are in that, I think that's like really sets a company apart from others, because people connect with people, and when they are able to see like that authenticity in a business or brand, it just adds another level of connection. So
Yeah. I totally agree. Very well said.
thank you. So how have you used your past failures to help you have greater success as you move forward?
Mhm. Um, Giving myself grace, and I struggled with that. Um, like saying there is a lesson in every failure, because as a society, and especially on campus, we don't encourage the lessons. We don't embrace the lessons that come from failure. So it's really about stepping out of the emotion of it and looking at it from a logical perspective, like what worked here and what absolutely has we can never do again. And finding the really good pieces of, how did it add service, how did it add value, how did it validate, and how can we translate those things into other experiences, and to connect it, really back to like the learning environment, to the classroom environment. That's referred to as a transfer of learning, right? So your professors, they want to see where you learn this thing and you can apply it somewhere else. That's the same thing that's the kind of discourse and conversation that we have to start having about failure. It's the transfer of what you've learned from the failure to the next experience that really get you that momentum that you need.
Yeah, I haven't really heard it put that way, like I guess specifically, and that really kind of intrigues me, because I can totally see how like if you're working on like a project within your education
Mhm.
and you like fail at it or something goes wrong, you may not like do well that time, but when you get into the real world or whatever you're doing after school, you're at least going to have that past failure that you can look at and understand why you failed and kind of avoid those reasons moving forward. So I really like what you said there. Um, so what do you enjoy most about what you do out of like everything that you do right now?
Um, I think I enjoy seeing the transformation. And that, just when the light bulb goes off, if you're being present, which requires no distractions, like turn your notifications off. And this is me and you right now, Cameron, right? It's That's when you can see the transformation. That's when you can see someone really stepping into their confidence, really stepping out of like the fear and the doubt and the insecurity. And then you can see, like, and I've been doing this for 13 years, 11 years in the classroom. So now I kind of, I know what to look for.
Mhm.
But that's what I love the most. And not even that I help to be a catalyst for it, but really that it's happening, that some kind of change or transformation is happening, and I'm there just to witness it and to see how it's going to impact and change, one little part of the world, whatever part of the world that is.
Absolutely. Yeah. That word impact. I really like that word just because it's a very like undervalued thing, because if you impact one person, that impact on that one person might go on to have like exponential impacts from there as well. So I think what you're doing as like an educator and just trying to impact people through what you're doing is really awesome.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
you're welcome. So what was your biggest fear when you first started, and what did you do to overcome that?
Wow. So when I first started 71 Proof, again, which was back in 2007, I actually had my ultimate goal was to start a hospitality venue. I'm in Tallahassee, Florida, and venue space is at like people will pay a lot. I really had to censor myself there to get access to venue space. And I wanted to be a part of like making, like changing that whole dynamic. And that's what made me go to hospitality school. So I attended the Art Institute of Tampa, got one of the very few degrees that they issued in wine, spirits, and beverage management. And my grandmother, she's like, well, who goes to school to open a bar? So I think a part of like one of the fears that I faced was, what are people going to say about me? Um, if this, I never had the thought that it wouldn't work, but if by chance this doesn't work, how will I be received? Like, what are they going to say when I'm not in the room? And I think the way that I got over that was putting myself in the room and building the relationships with the people that could start the conversations about, what's Latanya working on, and people that could advocate for me. So it really was about, I had to identify, what is it do I think that's holding me back? And let me just make sure that I'm a part of writing the story. So my daughter, she's 5, and I don't even know what we were talking about. And I told her, like, you have to let people know what you want them to say about you. And so that's kind of how I got over that, was being in the room, finding the influencers, the movers and shakers, and building really authentic relationships with them so that what they had to say about me was what I wanted to be said about me.
Okay, yeah. Do you think that the fear that you kind of had almost like helped guide you in the right direction towards your success? Because it almost sounds like you use that to like set yourself like on the right path. Because um,
Yeah. I would say I absolutely did, because I had spent so much of my life being shy and afraid and just not speaking up for myself, that I was like, really, I was just tired of it,
yeah,
right? So that had a lot to do with it. Like, I was tired of it. It takes a lot of energy to hold yourself in the space of fear. And that's one of the reasons why I really try to focus on mindset, is because once you break free from that, you have so much more energy and capacity to dream and imagine and implement, because otherwise your energy is tied up in something that is not productive.
absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. Like, right on. So I know you're one of the things that you speak about like very passionately is like using your business to like build a dynasty. So we can talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
So what exactly do you mean by like an entrepreneurial dynasty?
So we've heard of the Rockefellers, and we know the Waltons, the family behind Walmart. So in the literature, because I'm writing my doctoral researches on entrepreneurial dynasties, and in the literature, what a dynasty is defined is not just the business being passed down to like 2 successive generations. By definition, the business doesn't become a dynasty until it's been managed in the family for 3 consecutive generations, right? But the Rockefeller family no longer has a business. That business was broken up in 1911 after like the antitrust lawsuit, but they still have the money from the original business. So maintaining the wealth derived from those entrepreneurial endeavors, or maintaining control and operations of the business itself, for 3 successive generations is what defines a dynasty. That's what creates an entrepreneurial dynasty. There are political dynasties. There are families where the great grandfather was in politics and now the great grandson is in politics. So it's really about carrying the lineage through whatever context you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, cool. I like how you kind of broke that down between like maintaining the wealth as like a way you could do that, or maintaining like the entrepreneurial and the business. That I like how you kind of broke that down into two. That's pretty interesting. Well, we're about halfway through the episode, so we're going to take a moment for a brief advertisement. Over the past few months, podcasting is something that I've become very passionate about. It's helped me open many doors to new relationships, new networking opportunities, and giving the opportunity to share other people's knowledge and grow my personal brand, as well as have a lot of fun. Whether you're looking for a new marketing channel, have a message you want to share with the world, or just think it would be fun to have your own talk show, podcasting is an easy, inexpensive, and fun way to expand your reach online. BuzzSprout is hands down the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Your show can be online and listed in all the major podcast directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more within minutes of finishing your recording. Now, I have a special offer for all of the listeners here on the Student Built Startups podcast. Following the link in the show notes lets BuzzSprout know we sent you, gets you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and it helps support our show. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners, and the team at BuzzSprout is passionate about helping you succeed. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using BuzzSprout to get their message out to the world. The link is in the show notes. So what exactly like led you down the path of like developing the mindset of like entrepreneurial dynasties and focusing on long-term sustainability?
I had been teaching in my position as an instructor on campus for about 7 years, and I had my master's. I still only have my master's, right? But there's always this like, so when are you going to get your PhD? There was always that underlying tone, and when we're in faculty meetings, and I was just like, yeah, never, because so many of my colleagues, I'm just like, they are certifiably insane. And I do not want to subject myself to that. But here I am, right? And so I found this program. I attend Antioch University. I'm a member of the 17th cohort studying leadership and change. And what drew me to that program, because it's a liberal arts program, and it has a social justice lens, but I really wanted to understand wealth inequality. I really wanted to understand, how did we get here where you have a person literally worth trillions of dollars who is connected in some shape, form, or fashion to people who are barely making ends meet. I wanted to understand that. And so it was, as I was learning about the economics and capitalism, what I had seen in the research that I was reading is that entrepreneurs, there was a study that looked at entrepreneurs and employees. So entrepreneurs in working class households. And it found that even if they make the same amount of income, the entrepreneurs had more wealth, because your mindset changes, right? You hold on to those dollars a little more tightly. And so it's those savings mechanisms that allow entrepreneurs to buy real estate, become real estate investors, and that's where the wealth is being used. But from the study of wealth inequality and economic justice, it was really the transferring of that wealth or those real estate assets from one generation to the next and to the next, which would widen the gap. So I really entered into the study of entrepreneurial dynasties, looking at how did we get here from an economic standpoint. And the research just led me to understanding dynasties and the transgenerational, like that's the academic term, the transgenerational wealth transfers.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds really interesting. I'd honestly like to learn a little bit more about it. I mean, I think that is very interesting. That study that you mentioned, how it said that like entrepreneurs have like better wealth management, essentially.
Mhm.
And I think that's very intriguing because it seems like there's like you said, there's a mindset that you like develop from doing entrepreneurship. And I think that is like almost something that if there's a way we could like help everybody kind of learn that mindset that goes along with entrepreneurship, it could have a major impact on
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of people.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So why is the mindset of an entrepreneurial dynasty and focusing on that like generational transfer of wealth,
Mhm.
like a more like sustainable mindset and a better
Mhm.
mindset to have than just focusing on like the here and now?
Mhm. Mhm. Great question. We live so much in this microwave society. Like, I want it now. I want to experience it now. I want the benefit now. But what happens when now was last week? And so having a more sustainable mindset, and I talk when I'm in front of groups, I usually challenge people and it gets really uncomfortable. But I challenge people to go beyond setting like 3-month goals or 3-year goals to 3-generation goals. And it's like, because every decision you make today is going to impact somebody 40 or 50 years from now. And it's really likely that that somebody is going to be in your direct lineage, right? So if we can start to think about, and you're young yet, right? You guys are young. Who's thinking about grandkids? But one of the things I say is, well, if your grandparents thought about you, you know, 40, 50 years ago, how would things be different for you? And now you have this exciting responsibility to create something different for your grandkids or for your godchildren or whatever, right? So if we can kind of lift ourselves out of the moment at different parts of the entrepreneurial process, not just how am I feeling, how am I responding right now, but how will my response, right? So this helps me write emails a lot more diplomatically. How will my response in this email, how will this post, or how will this long form post on LinkedIn, how is this going to impact what I'm trying to build or what I'm trying to create? And so having a more long-term sustainable mindset, it really, and then it kind of gets back to your character, right? It gets back to who you are, and then being authentic to who you are and who you aspire to be.
Yeah, I mean, you're really getting my gears, my wheels turning in my head. I am like in a very deep mode of thought right now because what what
Yay!
what you just said is like it's making me think that like we all have the almost the power to like change the future, not necessarily
Mhm.
change it, but make the future what we
Mhm.
essentially want it to be. And like every small decision you make leads to something slightly different
Yeah,
as what's going to happen. So
absolutely.
I mean, I think that's just if you can like really truly understand that like concept, you can probably go through life in a much different manner than if you did not. So,
Absolutely.
so if there was like a set of steps that you would have somebody go through to like start developing that mindset of building a entrepreneurial dynasty or just focusing on like long-term wealth and like sustainability, what would those like steps be?
Oh, it's so interesting that you asked. So becoming fearless, right? Like
Oh yeah.
that's the ultimate outcome when I'm working with students or when I'm coaching or speaking. Like, I always want people to understand that however small it is, there may be some fear that is holding us back from something. And so I want the outcome of anyone that I engage with, I want them to be so empowered that they are on the road, they're on the journey to becoming fearless. But that's also the process. That's literally the model that I walk people through to build that dynasty. And so it's an acronym. I'm trying to see if I have them all on the map here. So foundation is the first step. And that's really the identity piece. That's where we get into who are you? Who do you aspire to be? And then the next step is evaluation. And that's we're evaluating how you are being received in your marketing messages on your website. How are you being received, and does that align with who you said you wanted to be? So foundation evaluation. Next, we get into the analysis of how are you positioning yourself in the market. And that's really inspired by Blue Ocean Strategy, which is a concept out of Harvard Business School. The subtitle of that book is How to Make Your Competition Irrelevant. And so that's one of my favorite books. But what we're doing is analyzing what is it that your customers need and where's the gap in the marketplace. And can you authentically fill that gap in a way that your competitors aren't doing? So foundation, evaluation, analysis. Next, we get into the retraining. And this is where the duality of me being an entrepreneur at a very corporate business school kind of comes into play, because the accounting that we learn in class is not entrepreneurial accounting. It's not accounting for small businesses. It's corporate accounting. And there's a book, it's called Profit First. Mike Michalowicz is the author, and he blows all of that out of the water. We know revenues minus expenses equals net profit or loss. The Profit First model says revenues minus profit minus your owner's salary and minus set aside some for taxes is what you have left to spend on expenses.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's it takes this whole retraining of everything that we think we've learned about what we know from marketing, the 4 Ps and all that. That's so almost ancient. How does it apply in the digital age? So the retraining module is really calling out the things that we know to be true about business, which don't always apply to entrepreneurship. So that's 4 out of the 7 steps. The other 2 are leverage, and that's where you create an operations manual, because when you bring on interns or your first key executive employee, you should be replacing yourself. And you do that through training other people. And that's what creates the leverage for you to go start the next business, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so then the last 2 steps are putting the systems in place and then the sustainability. That's when we get into what will the money be used for in 20 years or 30 years or for the 3rd generation. Is really having a conversation about what will the money be used for.
All right. I mean, you seem like you covered everything that goes into this process, very thoroughly. So I believe you did your research very well and thought this out very thoroughly, because it's I really like how you started with the foundation and just focusing on really the individual person, understanding who they are and evaluating and analyzing everything about them and kind of how they're being received. And I just think that's really great to start from such a foundational level, as it states,
right?
Because if you skip that step, it's going to be much harder, because I feel like eventually you'll have to backtrack, and that will lead to some problems.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So if there was one thing that you would have recommend someone to avoid doing during this process, if there's one common mistake people make, what would that one thing be?
I would say, to the absolute extent possible, do not set your prices based off what your competitors are doing. Because we tend to say, oh, I'm new to the market, I'm going to start under because I don't have as much experience. But especially for, depending on how long you've been in business, just because you're a college student, that doesn't mean you hadn't been in business or hadn't been doing this for years. And so you have to account for your expertise. Your prices should reflect your expertise and bringing the product or the solution to the market. It's not a reflection, it's not a function of what other people are doing. And a lot of this, I promise, I'm speaking from experience. So with 71 Proof, my bartending business, I didn't even know what I needed to know to set my prices. So I called some of my competitors or my would-be competitors, and I did some market research. Like, I pretended I was going to have an event and I needed a bartender. And so they were asking, well, how many guests and all these other details that I didn't know to ask. And so once I got like a quote from them, I was like, oh, okay, I can just kind of set my prices a little bit under there so I could be competitive. But it did not change how much work went into what I had to do to
Mm.
deliver an outstanding experience. And so I struggled with that for years, literally, like up until I read Profit First, which was 2018, and I started the business in 2007, right? I
Y-
struggled with, how do I price my services without being too expensive and without burning myself out? And it wasn't until I landed at Profit First where I was like, oh, I've been undercharging for 11 years. It was just like, what am I doing?
Yeah, yeah. I really like that whole profit first mindset, because if you don't have some level of profit, you can't be sustainable and you can't continue helping whoever you're helping in whatever aspect that is.
Exactly.
Um, and I kind of lost my train of thought, so we're gonna move on to the next
Okay,
section here. But
okay.
it was not that important, I guess. So we're gonna move on to the Fast Five section. I'll ask 5 quick questions, and we'll just go through them pretty quick, and then
Okay.
after that, we'll wrap things up. So, what is the most valuable learning experience that you have had?
Ooh, to um to know that I deserve to be at whatever table where the decisions are made. Like, I absolutely deserve to be there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. What is one book that you would recommend? I know you've recommended 2 already, sort of. So, do
Yeah,
you have a third one lined up?
I do.
All right.
The E-Myth Revisited is by Michael Gerber, and it's the myth of small businesses, or the myth of entrepreneurs and why they fail. And what he talks about is that there are these 3 personas that every business owner has to have. There's a technician who does the service or makes the product, who is different from the manager who has to literally figure out the day-to-day operations, but it's the entrepreneur that has the vision for the business. And I didn't know that just because I was a great bartender, that didn't always mean I was going to be a great owner of a bartending business. So the E-Myth Revisited.
That sounds like a really interesting book, because it seems like the entrepreneurs, they have different like roles that we have to take on, and doing that at times can be challenging. And I
Yeah.
think that understanding exactly what those roles are can help you kind of navigate that. So,
Mm-hmm.
what is one business tool that you would recommend?
One business tool that I would recommend, besides becoming fearless, right? But um, I would say, like, really understanding spreadsheets, because yeah, you can plug stuff into QuickBooks, but that's going to cost you, right? And we're talking about minimizing our expenses. So being able to see the relationship between how much you spend to produce a product and how much revenue that product brings in, like, you have to be able to see that on a per unit basis. And for services as well. But if you can't put those numbers side by side, and if you can't see how the relationship shows up in the numbers, then you can have a bookkeeper that can tell you anything and pull the wool over your eyes and the carpet up from under you, like, at the same time, without knowing how to, like, manage those numbers yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you there. I think that once you have a solid understanding of your numbers and you know how to find how much dollars you're getting from so many units of work, it's going to be able to just give you a different understanding of your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you go about scheduling your time and planning things ahead?
Oh, so time management is like such a myth, right? It's like time doesn't need our help managing it. But what I found that I have to be more mindful of is how I allocate the 24 hours in a day that I get. I never ever thought I would say this. Never ever thought I would be a morning person, but in order for me to get finished, and that's with a PH at the front end and the D at the end, right? I literally get up around 4:45 in the morning, so that I can like do my prayer and meditation and then write for a couple of hours before I wake up my daughter. Because I mean, now like things are a lot different because schools are closed with the pandemic and everything, right? So my day has to start earlier so that she and I can get like really good quality time. And then I have to make her compete with my work because I still like am gainfully employed. So it's really about understanding how you allocate your time. And it's like, I can't answer that one as quickly as I probably should because there's so many dynamics to it. But there's a concept that your readers, I'm happy to share this with your readers. It's called the healthy mind platter. And I interpret it as making sure that you allocate focus time, you allocate relaxation time, and you allocate connection time. Like, who are the people that like edify you? Who are the people that are always rooting for you, but at the same time are going to hold you accountable to the very best version of yourself? And you have to allocate time to cultivate those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I really agree with that because I mean, all three of those like types of time have benefits in their own ways because your focus time, you got to get your work done at some point. Your
Mhm.
relaxation time, like I've heard from a lot of people that that's when they get their best thoughts and their best ideas is when you're just kind of relaxing and not having to focus on other stuff. And the
Mhm.
thoughts
Yep.
and creativity just seems to happen at those times. And then, like you said, the connections
Mhm.
are really
Mhm.
important to maintain those and build those relationships with people.
Yeah.
So the last question here is, what's the number one thing that drives your motivation?
Oh, the number one thing that drives me. So yeah, it's easy to say my daughter, right? I really want to create something different for her. But when I really think about it, I think who I was at her age probably drives me even more because like I said, was so shy, spent a lot of my time being shy that I don't even know like what she like little Tanya. I call her little Tanya. Like, what does she want out of life? Right? What were her dreams? Because I never gave a voice to those things. So I'm so driven by creating this space and creating the opportunity for little Tanya to be fearless and say, this is what I want. And this is what I'm willing to work for. And in that, being able to see how that's going to improve my relationship with my daughter, improve my relationship with my mom, right? But those are the things that I'm most driven by, our relationships and impact.
Yeah, I really like what you said there. And I'm just going to kind of leave it at that because you did a great job kind of explaining that. Well, Professor White, you gave some great information about how we can build our dynasties with our business and just sharing your awesome story, which I really enjoyed hearing that. But before we wrap up, I'll ask you to provide one main takeaway that you'd like everyone to remember.
One takeaway is that you absolutely already have everything you need to start building your dynasty. You can get a lot of the other things along the journey, but you have everything you need right now.
Absolutely. That's a really great takeaway. And last thing here, where can we find more about you and becoming fearless?
Yay. So meetprofessorwhite.com, and that's Prof White. /privilege. So on that site, there is like the TEDx talk that I gave on privilege being a continuum, but I also include the top 6 steps to take in building your dynasty.
Awesome. That's great. And everyone listening, make sure to go check that out. I checked it out already, so it's really great. So
all right, cool. Thank you so much, Cameron.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure. All right. Well, that wraps it up for this episode, guys. I'm super happy I was able to share Professor White's story with all of you. And I appreciate you for listening all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Professor White for taking the time to share some of her knowledge with all of you guys listening. I really appreciate it. And also, if you're listening right now and you're interested in finding out more about the Student Built Startups podcast and what I'm all about, you can head over to studentbuiltstartups.com to find everything we talked about in this episode, some more information about me, as well as the links to anything that we mentioned during this interview. I also appreciate reviews and ratings, so if you're into that, please go take the extra 30 to 60 seconds to help others understand why this is a worthwhile podcast and provide some context to maybe why they should listen to it. Now, that's all that I got for you guys today. Thanks again, and I will catch you on the next episode.